This week, we're bringing you a special episode filled with some of our most memorable highlights from our conversations with several industry experts. Get ready for a journey through some of the most insightful and pressing industrial cybersecurity topics and conversations. Over the past year, we've had the privilege of speaking with leading authorities on industrial cybersecurity, from asset owners and operators to cybersecurity researchers and the world's leading cybersecurity solution providers across every industry. You'll hear their perspectives on the evolving threat landscape, risks to be aware of, best practices for protecting industrial manufacturing and critical infrastructure environments, and the innovative technologies and solutions shaping the future of this dynamic field. We've got a lot of interesting ground to cover. Welcome to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. In each episode, we dive into the world of industrial cybersecurity. Join us as we cover the latest trends, innovations, and practical insights as we talk with leaders and practitioners across the industry. Gear up and let's get into this week's episode.
A couple of minutes ago, you mentioned one of the important needs is to have visibility into the problem, have a recognition of the problem. And visibility can literally mean, what does the asset base look like in my environment? I haven't gone and taken an inventory in 10 or 15 years. I don't have a current network diagram of my manufacturing facility. So from a TXOne perspective, I think I'd answer the question across 2 or 3 different dimensions. One, we think that it is fundamentally critical that the solutions to address these specialized environments have to be OT native. So we have a belief system, and we were born out of like native ICS protocols. We started with one protocol. Now we're up to 250 different protocols. So that's really, really important for a whole bunch of reasons. That's probably outside the scope of our conversation here. But it's super important to have very purpose-built solutions that sit in these industrial environments. Taking an IT solution and trying to drive it deep into the lower tiers of the Purdy model is just not going to work for a whole bunch of reasons that this audience will probably understand. I think the other thing that we're doing, it's kind of related to that, is the ability. I think one of our crown jewels of achievements is the ability to do deep packet inspection with these protocols to take preventative action.
That's very important.
Yeah, that's really important. And because of, I think, the work that Velta and others have done, creating more mature visibility customers out there that are beginning to understand what's out in that environment, they can better address the specific risks they have because they have some acknowledgement of the risk. And then the third thing I'll throw out, this does not get as much talk as I think it even deserves at TXOne, but your question made me think of it, is TXOne participates in something called the Zero Day Initiative, ZDI. Okay. And in partnership with our former parent, Trend Microsystems, over the last 3 years, we have been finding 62% of the zero-day exploits. And what we do with that, and there's other major companies that participate in this, other major security companies, but it's a bug bounty program. So when somebody finds a vulnerability, they bring it to us. We develop either a software patch or a network virtual patch. We'll publish that out in our pattern updates to our install base and to our partners. And then we'll notify the OEM provider of whatever device or system was compromised. We'll share the exploit with them and give them 120 days of confidentiality to go build a fix and manifest it out into their install base. So that's something we do. It doesn't get a lot of attention, but we've consistently been finding more than 62% of the zero-day exploits globally, and our customers benefit of that.
That is fantastic. I love to hear that you're working with the industry. You're working with some very smart people that find and discover these bugs that their entire job is, my guess, is sitting behind a computer trying to break things or exploit things, if you would call it, and getting paid to do so. But the fact that you can take that and materialize it and turn it into let's help the entire ecosystem. Kudos and hats off to you and the team there at TXOne for that. That's phenomenal.
Hey, thank you, Craig. Thank you.
Yep, I appreciate it. So tell me a fun fact about you. Give me one thing besides your bald head that I didn't already know.
I'm a certified skydiver.
Ooh, that's something I've always wanted to do, that I can't bring myself to jump out of a very good plane that can land on its own, but I think I would love the adrenaline jump of doing that.
Now, that's a fun fact about me, but I'll also say I'm much older than the last time I did it, and my jump book doesn't have an expiration date, so I'm not jumping out of planes currently. But in my 20s, I did it quite frequently, and it was a major rush, to your point. It's the biggest rush you'd have of your life to jump out of a perfectly functioning plane at 1.5 miles high.
Yeah, because I've got a fear of heights. So I can see if I were up there and someone would gently nudge me and I just kind of fell, where that would work. But for me to actually take myself and jump out of the plane, that would be tough. That would be tough. All right. So we've covered a lot of different things. I think that for us, there's the market as a whole in the industrial space. It's really becoming more top of mind for boards, for C-suite. And we touched on this a little bit ago. As organizations are beginning to move that direction, we are seeing more board members sitting on cross companies, taking notice of different things and really trying to drive that narrative down. One of the thoughts is, does it make sense to start at the C level, meaning a CIO or a CISO, and try and bring adoption and bring awareness? Or do you go back to your native roots and you start working with the controls engineers and you start driving the narrative from the bottom up? We hear a lot about asset ownership. It's not going to work if we don't have buy-in from the asset owners. IT can only drive this so far down. What are you guys seeing, and where are you finding successes that other organizations may be able to say, maybe we should look at an approach that way?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about that problem because I lead a sales organization and a business development organization. So we try to find what has the most efficacy in terms of how do we get our customers to recognize the problem and solve it. Unfortunately, our learnings of the last couple of years have been we kind of have to talk to the IT and the OT side of the house to try to bring them together. It's not universally true, Craig. I like the idea of calling high and have it pushed down, but all too often, even industrial type companies, the CISO, the CIO, they really don't understand the pain of the plant operator.
That's a true statement. Yep.
So it, of course, varies by company, but I would say where we've had the most success is by trying to bring those parties together and address them as different personas. We have become somewhat proficient at pivoting the conversation to the unique needs of each of those stakeholders because they are very different. So we haven't found an easy way, Craig. If you can show me an easier way to get to the person that is the stakeholder for the problem, I'd love to learn from you. Right now, we're kind of having to toggle between IT and IT.
We're seeing the same thing. We are trying to identify that persona, but I would agree with you 1,000%. Every project that we've done that has been the most successful has been when IT and OT work together to come and try and solve the problem jointly as an organization, not a this is your problem or this is your problem. And they're sitting there going back and forth with each other and nobody is fixing the problem.
I agree with that too, Craig. A little footnote to my answer that this is a minor thing the audience might appreciate. I do feel like as we see these deployments getting adoption in the marketplace, it's becoming very evident that the IT folks kind of have to own the oversight of it. The tools, the SIM, the SOC, the alerting, that skill base, that infrastructure, that mindset is very conducive to a IT security professional. Once you convince the plant folks that you're not going to impair their operation. So the IT, to me, has an ownership and reporting and management oversight role that is becoming pretty pronounced in my mind. And the OT folks will take that help all day long.
And they will, because their skill sets are different. The OT teams, the controls engineers, sometimes they're called maintenance guys, are not skilled in the technical aspect of some of these tools and technologies that you guys are providing and other vendors are providing, but they understand the assets. We don't see IT teams being tasked with remediating a PLC. They're not going to come down to that level. But the tools that we're talking about that work in the environment, they understand technology sometimes better than the OT teams do and can kind of bridge that gap some. So, no, great footnote.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Are you guys seeing more global adoption? Or are you guys seeing prevalent market share more in the US? Where would you say, taking aside, and maybe taking aside is not it, maybe including the geopolitical landscape of today, given the events that have unfolded in the last 2 weeks, are you seeing more adoption EMEA, Middle East, US, Asia Pacific? From a global standpoint, what are you seeing the landscape look like?
Yeah, I'm probably a little biased in my answer to the question just based on who I work for. Our technology was invented for a very, very large chip manufacturer that was trying to recover from massive fab shutdowns half a decade ago. So our adoption base, the TXOne adoption base, has moved from Asia to the West. Now, but globally, taking off my TXOne data set, I'll say it's less geographically oriented and maybe more industry vertical driven. I see semiconductor in part because of the story I just told you, but I think semiconductor, because they have their own water treatment plants, they have their own refinery operations, they have their own power generation system. So they check all the boxes of what we call the CISA critical industries in one industry vertical. And the semiconductor manufacturers have pushed this down into their supply chain because the supply chain is very fragile and it's distributed all around the world.
TXOne has a unique offering around virtual patching. So why don't you give our audience an idea of what virtual patching is and why it can be relevant in the OT space?
Yeah, so virtual patching is the whole concept behind, we know that OT hasn't been able and may never get to a patching cycle like we have in IT security. It might never get there. And so even though a vendor might come out with a patch for an ICS piece of hardware out there, it doesn't mean they can patch right then and there. So the whole idea behind virtual patching is with a TXOne virtual appliance sitting in front of a single asset or multiple assets, by turning on the appropriate policy that says, hey, I want to stop these vulnerabilities from being exploited. I can do that from a appliance space, and then all the downstream devices inherit that virtual patch, so to speak.
Yeah, which, from a CISO or an info security perspective, for clients that are starting to learn about systems that they just can't replace, meaning they can't get rid of the technology that's being used to run those machine centers, virtual patching to me would be like an easy button for them to push, meaning that I can't force the plant to take that unpatchable, vulnerable asset off the network, but I have a way to secure it through a virtual patching methodology and technology to get what I want as a security guy, but at the same time not being impactful to the plant. And there's a lot of people, I don't think they really understand what virtual patching is, because when I bring that up, even if I'm talking to technical people, the security people, they're like, what is that? Because they're so used to putting an agent in the environment. Is there a way to get the AV and to get other security characteristics and policies that they would normally implement it at the endpoint, whereas on the plant floor, you can't do that with a PLC. It's hard to do with older Windows operating systems. You can't do that with drives and robots and motors and pumps and things of that nature, where now you can start providing a virtual patch capability, which I think is pretty neat.
Yeah, and it buys time. Even if you do have the ability to patch, maybe it's every 6 months or a year in your OT environment, but if it's a critical enough vulnerability that you want to stop, virtual patching provides you that extra time until you can get into a regular patch cycle.
Right. Even not only just a critical vulnerability, but also if it's a critical asset that's really important to your operation, meaning that I can't afford to lose this machine or these machines, because if I do, my plant is going to slow and stop, and then it's really costing me big dollars, big money. So,
that's a great point.
Yeah. So, rewinding a little bit, OT cybersecurity, generally speaking, is being a fairly new phenomenon within the security arena. I come at it from the other side, right? My background is manufacturing. My background is infrastructure around control systems. The challenge that I see is this IT-OT convergence that people talk about, right? Which is a good thing, right? We want convergence, we want alignment, we want collaboration, we want transparency, but I don't really see that practiced very well. Meaning, and so IT, sometimes we recognize, well, at least open the door for the conversation to get started, thinking we need to do better, we need to do something, but then it kind of drifts and stops, or IT can only go so far. Then the challenge becomes is how do you get the OT organization to move the other direction and start wanting to be a willing participant in providing digital safety, cybersecurity around their control system environments and working with their IT team. What has been your experience with that IT-OT relationship?
Yeah, it is still heavily siloed as we talk to customers. When I talk and I'm talking with the IT folks, I think one of the biggest ways to bridge that gap, most of the time they have executive level sponsorship. They know they need to get better, right? But they're leaving it to the IT teams to do that. And I think the first thing from an IT perspective is get with the folks and truly understand from the OT side what their world is about. It's amazing to me how many customers we go out and visit, and the IT side has never done a plant walkthrough. They've not done that. And so bridge that gap. Pick up the phone and say, hey, can you take me on a plant walkthrough? I'd like to understand what is going on here. Where are those? And let them lead the conversation. Like, just truly understand what pressure and what pain that they're under. And also, don't just assume because you've done it in the IT world for this long and you've had success on your IT assets that those same solutions are going to fit into the OT environment. There are very unique challenges there.
Right. And when we say walkthrough, that means you show up to the plant with your proper PPE, planning on spending, a few hours or a half a day or more on site with the ability to open up the panels to see what's in them, right? Not just walk through the plant and look at the IDFs and kind of take a cursory view of plant operations, but actually look under the hood to see what drives those control systems and how they're architected and how they're put in. To me, that's one of the most eye-opening activities that we witness, because that's the work we do, right? That's the world in which we live. And when I usually take IT people and meet them in a plant, one, you hope they show up with the proper PPE to even be able to get on the plant floor. Number one, that's number one. Number two is when you open up that panel, are they willing to dig in to try to solve that problem? Or are they going to go, that's not me, right? And that's okay. It is. If it's not you, then how do we solve this problem? And that's where IT needs to be able to influence that senior leadership and that OT leadership going, look, we all need help here to go and solve this problem. We need with the proper vendors that are whose technologies are OT specific from a cybersecurity perspective, because my IT tools are not necessarily the best, and the skills required to do this work are not in my team's background. And if you can get them to start thinking and saying that, then I think it moves the needle a little bit further along. That's my big takeaway when it comes to when you say walkthrough.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because I've learned so much working with you as a valued partner of TXOne. I come at it from the product perspective. How do I fix these? Hey, you just put this network piece of equipment right here, and then if they have that eye-opening experience where you go under the hood and you're like, where do you put it? Does it have power? And
real estate.
Yeah, to have the right partners that have the right expertise to leverage all that skill, because not one person, not one company has all the answers. There's not a silver bullet. We have to work together at the team and leverage different expertise. Maybe I have the product expertise on the networking side with virtual patching. You all have the expertise and, implementation, going through those walk. So it's just very important that we all work together.
Because we have to work side by side by the plant ownership in order. When can you take that machine down? Can you even open that panel during operation? Because some panels, are very dangerous, right? There's a lot of power in there. And so you may not be able to get into that panel until there's a shutdown, right? Lockout, tag out, de-energize, so you can get in there and actually work around that in a safe manner. That's part of it. And that also changes the dynamics of how you do these implementations, because now you're looking for downtime windows, planned downtime windows to go and do some of this work. And that means you got to be close to the plant to be able to know what are their operational schedules like. When do they take down the plant for general maintenance activities that they've got to do? Maybe it only happens once or twice a year. And so, or maybe you have to work around their production schedules and you have to be able to map that out in order to be able to do some of this work. And that's really, really important. That's for sure. That being said, what are some of the other technologies that TXOne brings to the market? We have to talk about virtual patching. What else does TXOne have in their portfolio that would be beneficial to the plant floor organizations from a security perspective?
Yeah, I think that once you get past the network side of things with virtual patching, microsegmentation, those types of technology, deep packet inspection, and being able to set up which machines can talk to which ones, really come in now. So that kind of deals with the external threat coming through from that IT to OT convergence, whether that, and we know number one is ransomware, right? And so the tools that we put in place for the network perspective really help address that. But now you got to worry about the insider threat. What comes in behind the network? Who has physical access to that OT asset? So when you talk about protecting that asset, we want to make sure that it's free of malware. Maybe that it stays within, nobody's using the USB ports on that machine itself. That we want application lockdown so that I don't care if it's good or bad. I don't want to change. This machine's been doing the same thing for 10 years, and I don't want it to change. So for those types of use cases, we have an agent-based solution that we call Stellar that is, again, gets installed, and it provides all those features to make sure that we're locking down that asset, protecting that asset from change, protecting it from malware, making sure that the USB device, only certified or authorized USB devices can be used on that system itself. It doesn't require cloud dependency. That's very key. So all the updates and changes happen when you say updates and changes can happen.
Thanks for tuning in to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. And if you found this podcast helpful or have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please leave us a review or let us know. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.